And my question, I think, goes mainly to Tang Wenfang. Very interesting presentation. I lived in China a couple of years in the early 2000s, and I recognize very well your description of the Chinese society. However, I remember when I was there, they had introduced local elections, and as Kristin just showed you, went on this field trip all over Western China, interviewed local people, and there were all of these sentiments of local democracy kind of starting at that time. And having studied Russian and developments of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, I was thinking, what on earth are they doing? Because the main analysis of what happened with the dissolution of the Soviet Union was that they allowed for local government to take place. Now, election, multi-candidate local government, with an increase of legitimacy of the local government and expectations of the local government to be accountable. And the idea of accountable government then increased, and then the demand also came to central government. So why didn't this happen in China? And I think one of the reasons is that when you opened up for multi-candidate elections on the local level, you also opened up for critique of the local government in the media. But you didn't really open up for critique. And when you show all these mass movements and protests, they are usually local protests. And you don't really see that much protest towards the central government yet. So in a way, you're allowing some kind of movements on the low level, but not really on the central level. And I'm wondering what's happening if you open up for more information on what's actually going on the central level. I remember also from the same period of time, they opened up for some more information in the press before the SARS epidemics came out. And I remember coming into the office, I was working with the Chinese, and they had read in the newspaper that it was a head turning up in the river, not far from there. There had obviously been a murder somewhere in Beijing, and they were totally shocked. It had never crossed their mind that the Chinese could actually kill somebody. And I'm thinking some reflections on that. And you can think, and we can take two more questions from the audience if you have, anybody have? No? Yeah, you have one question over there, and then we'll run Stein. Yeah.
I was struck by this sort of performative aspects, actually, of humiliation at the local level of politicians. And it seems to me, if I were a conspiracy theorist, I would say that the central government, the system is set up so that the central government is protected in a way. But then there's this trust. There's this input trust at the central level that's higher for people that trust. And it doesn't matter as much at the local level. So I'm wondering if you have thoughts, and of course it could be bi-directional, but if you have thoughts of what's first, the trust, the sort of symbolic trust at the central level, or is it that it's taking that trust and acting on it? Do you understand the question?
Yes. And then we have Boris. Can you please wait for the microphone because it's been sent on the internet, so we need.
I think it's okay. Just go. He says it's.
No, I've been told we have because of the internet transmissions.
But it's not working.
It's not working. Well, then we'll repeat your question. Then, yeah.
About how to interpret the trust question, especially in Russia. Generally, when people get this question, do you think most people can be trusted? They cannot answer because they don't know most people. So I would suggest a more intuitive understanding of what people are actually answering. I think what they do when they answer the question is they make an evaluation of the moral standard of the society in which they live. That's because there is no other way to answer the question. So what is the default position if you try to interact with other people? Will they take advantage of you, or is there some way honest reciprocity? It's not that if someone comes out on the street and asks, can you lend me 2,000 euros, you will just hand over the money, right? That's not what we are thinking about. And then I have a question about China. I've spent quite some time to understand how the Chinese civil service public administration works. And I would just like to hear your reaction to this. On the one hand, it's very politicized. The Communist Party is in control. If I understand it, the word for a neutral, impartial, non-politicized civil servant doesn't exist in Mandarin Chinese. There is no word for this. Secondly, so it's very politicized, like in most semi-corrupt or third world countries. But at the same time, it's very professional. It's a combination of politicization and professionalism. The entry demands for entering the civil service is phenomenally complicated. And the third thing is that it's not ruled by, what did you say, formal laws or regulations like we are used to. This is from a colleague at LSE, British. He said, it's ruled by mandates. And I read a fantastic book, Regulating Banking in China, yes. Which I think, and he calls this suasive regulation. So, and so they call people and make suggestions and try to convince them how to deal with the credit structures. And Chinese banks are perfectly happy with this. They understand it. But the Western banks are completely lost because there are no regulations. So it's a very atypical type of civil service that exists in China that might be the explanation for what you say. It's both politicized, but it's at the same time very professional. It's not very, in a paper I call it a cadre organization or a mandate organization or a mission organization. But it's a very different organizational animal than the Bavarian type of public administration that we think, and most of my colleagues think, is the key for success.
Okay, I think we are running. Is it a short question?
Try to make it short.
Yeah.
Tang, a very interesting presentation. You said in the very beginning that this was, what we about to present would be provocative. To me, and I don't much agree with your reasoning, though, why is it provocative? Because it's so different from the blueprint that we're looking for. So the question in a sense is, how much of a disadvantage is it to be a Western researcher trying to understand the society? We're asking the wrong questions and looking for the wrong answers. And to illustrate it, if I did get your essence correctly, in terms of stability going forward, the weak point is the center. The very top of the Communist Party. If they start to disagree and fight, you may see something that's very, very nasty. But it's not what we're looking for. The people uprising against the system or the party or the legitimacy. And for that reason, to me, you can actually stomach a severe downturn in the economy if the center responds properly. Despite the fact that any Western sort of perceptions, it should fall apart.
Thank you. I wish we had more time for questions and debate. We need some coffee, but very short comments from the panel. If Åse and Kristin can start, and then we close with. Yeah.
I'll just respond to your question about what people talk about, what elites talk about when they answer these standard questions. We actually have their verbatims, because this was done in in-depth interviews where people were interviewed with relatively few questions. We have complete transcripts of each interview. We've coded them in NVivo 9, which is a software for qualitative data analysis. We prepared tables presenting the frequencies. There is the spread of responses according to the coding scheme that we used, but we also have the content of what they said. So we combined the tables with the content analysis to see what people actually said. And the interesting thing is that very few of the elites actually referred to the current situation in Russia. Some of them, they said times are really bad, people have to focus on their own lives. They need to earn money, they will kill people to get access to some money. But most people talked about other people more generally. They talked about the need for trust in society, as trust is the glue really keeping the whole thing together. They talked about the benefits that trusting people has on people. They talked about reciprocity to some extent. You have to let people show themselves, prove themselves first, and then you can decide whether you're going to trust them or not. So we actually have more. What I did know was just to do the main findings, but it's much more detailed than that. So I can show you that when we finish the work.
Okay, I'll try and be very brief because we're getting close to the end, but I don't think that you need to be a conspiracy person to feel that the central government is creating a scapegoat in the local government sometimes. I think it happens a lot. It's a way of the central government in China to maneuver some of these discontent on the local level. So by intervening, like Wenfang said, like when the central government comes in and intervenes in some of these conflicts, and it's not necessarily always very transparent or very streamlined on how they do it. It's often made on an ad hoc basis. So to your question, I'm not going to go further in because I'll leave some space for Wenfang, but no need to think you're a conspiracy theorist. You go.
Okay. I hope I follow the questions accurately. My understanding is one of the points you were making is if people know more, whether they would be less supportive of the government. I think there's an article by Gary King and 2 other co-authors about how much information people do get online these days and how critical they are of the government. So I think that this idea that people don't know enough because of censorship is really, it's becoming more and more not true. I think people with the technology, people do know what's going on in China and outside of China. So related to that, whether local elections would increase people's demand for higher level democratic elections. I think about some studies on the concept of democracy in China. It's very different understanding of democracy. It's not about elections. You will see that majority of people in China think that democracy means government responsiveness, not whether there's a well-developed electoral system. So that's that point. That's actually a very good question, but the hardest to answer. Whether we're asking the wrong questions, what kind of questions we should ask. Well, I think my quick response would be that I think my intention to write about this populist authoritarianism in China is to show that a system of non-democratic nature can function in a specific environment. I think as long as it's working there, and that should be an effective system. So I think when we try to use some of the Western theories and concepts about democracy, civil society, and that might not apply to the Chinese situation. So if you look at these seemingly contradictory components I described in populist authoritarianism, they do coexist. They do operate and they circulate and it's working, at least so far.
Thank you so much. I wish I had more time. Now there's coffee for you out there.